Before my parents passed away, they had arranged 3 potential marriages for me. Whomever I chose would eventually become the sole successor to the Anderson Group legacy. In my past life, I shyly chose Chloe Vance, the girl I had adored from afar for years. However, less than a year into our marriage, Chloe reportedly passed away after a sudden illness. Yet, 10 years later, I spotted her late one night. The woman who had supposedly been dead for a decade was standing there, sharing a passionate kiss with Caleb Hayes. In that instant, the truth hit me like a physical blow. Chloe had a lover all along. Her tragic death was nothing more than an elaborate hoax designed to let her vanish and elope with him. During a subsequent car accident, Chloe actually lost her life trying to save mine. As she lay dying, she whispered to me that she knew the deception was wrong, but she and Caleb were truly in love. She begged me that if I ever had a second chance at life, I should never choose her again. Shortly after those words, the world went black and I lost consciousness. When I finally opened my eyes, a voice drifted toward me, asking if I had decided on a bride now that I was a man. That resonant, authoritative tone left me stunned for several moments. I had actually been reborn, waking up on the morning of my 20th birthday. I looked up to see my grandfather, looking years younger and watching me with a warm, expectant smile. I clenched my fists as memories of my previous life flooded back like a tidal wave, eventually settling on the image of Chloe bleeding out on the pavement. Her trembling pleas echoed in my mind like a blade, repeatedly piercing my heart, a pain so sharp it felt as though my very soul was being shredded. "Grandpa, I am not choosing Chloe," I said, my voice shaking on the verge of a breakdown. "I choose Miriam Waldorf." "Miriam?" My grandfather began a cough, clearly caught off guard. "I thought you couldn't stand her." "You mean Miriam Waldorf?" To everyone else, she was the other half of the duo known as the Terrible Twins. Whenever we were in the same room, a heated argument was guaranteed to break out. In my last life, her family had relocated to Germany. I never quite figured out why she remained unmarried and never crossed paths with me again. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Facing my grandfather's skeptical look, I took a long, steadying breath and gave a firm nod. "My mind is made up. She is the one." I have to admit that Miriam and I were total frenemies in my past life. We spent our days bickering, pulling pranks, and constantly at each other's throats. Looking back now, those chaotic years of constant fighting felt much more vibrant and alive than my entire hollow marriage to Chloe. Since fate has granted me a second chance, I refuse to dive back into that frozen abyss. Seeing my resolve, my grandfather stopped trying to change my mind and reached for the pen on his desk. "I'm getting too old to understand the whims of youth," he sighed. "That Waldorf girl is certainly spirited, but I have noticed that the special sparkle in her eyes only ever shines when she looks at you." His words caused my heart to skip a beat. I instinctively tried to argue, but he cut me off with a wave of his hand. "That is enough, Edward. These old eyes of mine are weary. Since the decision is made, we will schedule the wedding for 2 months from now. I am told it is an exceptionally auspicious date." As I left the study, I gripped that thin marriage contract so tightly my knuckles turned white. My palms were slick with a cold, nervous sweat. I suddenly recalled my past life, how I had rushed to tell Chloe the news with such excitement. She had simply looked at me with indifference and asked why I thought that was good news or what I had to be happy about. Reflecting on those words now, her true meaning is finally clear to me. I began to make my way down the long, silent hallway. After walking through the gallery and reaching the front courtyard, I encountered several faces from my past. "So, who did Edward end up picking?" Sophie Miller, always the most inquisitive one, was the first to speak up. "Leo, never want to miss out on drama," chimed in immediately. "Is that even a question? Out of the 3 of you, Miriam is the least likely candidate. Everyone knows Edward is head over heels for Chloe." My gaze drifted toward the 2 women. Miriam, ever the nonconformist, was lounging lazily on a low tree branch with her eyes closed, acting as if the entire situation was beneath her notice. Chloe stood a short distance away, looking elegant in a sharply tailored trench coat, the hem fluttering gently in the breeze. In my previous life, I had been hopelessly lost in the fog of what I thought was love. I opened my mouth to speak, but she beat me to it. "Edward, my heart belongs to another man," she said. "I'm begging you, please let me go." Her words felt like a physical blow to my chest. This was a confrontation that had never taken place in my first life. As I looked at her, a chilling thought took root in my mind. Was it possible that she had been reborn as well? That would be the only explanation for why she was suddenly brave enough to defy my grandfather's wishes just to be with the man she truly loved. My voice shook as I held up the marriage contract. "Chloe, this document was signed by my grandfather himself." "I know," Chloe interrupted, her voice softened by desperation. "But even if it means losing everything, I have to be with Caleb." Hearing that name was like a bolt of thunder in my mind. I wasn't the only one shocked. The other three, standing nearby, were equally stunned. In my socially isolated past, Caleb had been my only true friend. We had supported each other through our darkest and most difficult times. Just as we finally began to see a glimmer of hope for the future, a woman stepped in and tore our friendship apart. My parents had sacrificed their lives to save hers. Given the debt she owed my family, she had no right to treat me with such cold-hearted cruelty. There are times when pain becomes so overwhelming that all you can do is offer a bitter laugh. It felt as though a massive hand was crushing my chest, threatening to shatter my ribs. I struggled to maintain my composure, but the stubborn finality in Chloe's eyes felt like a blade twisting slowly in my chest. If she never had feelings for me, why did she spend years leading me on? Tucked away in the corner of my study, there was still a box I kept. It contained over 100 love letters she had sent me. Each one was overflowing with expressions of deep longing and devotion. As Chloe opened her mouth to speak again, I was tempted to snap at her that she had already gotten her wish because I hadn't chosen her. I forced myself to swallow the words. She had deceived me for 10 years in my last life, so why should I grant her such an easy escape in this one? With 2 months left until the wedding, I decided to let her suffer in her own anxiety for a while. With that thought, I tucked the contract back into my pocket. The decision is final, I announced. As for my choice, you will find out when the time is right. I expect every single one of you to be there at my wedding. I turned on my heel and walked away. Just as I rounded the corner of the hallway, I collided with someone who hadn't managed to get out of the way in time. Looking down, I saw Caleb sprawled on the floor, fresh tears still clinging to his eyelashes. Before I could say a word, Caleb reached out and grabbed the hem of my jacket. "Edward, you have everything already," he sobbed. "Can't you just let me have Chloe?" He was about to drop to his knees in supplication, but before he could, Chloe rushed over and pulled him into a protective embrace. She glared up at me with pure fury in her eyes. "Edward, if you have a problem, take it out on me. Why are you bullying Caleb like this?" Caleb huddled against her, looking like a wounded puppy as tears finally spilled over. "Don't, Chloe. It's my fault, all of it." His pathetic display only made me look like the villain in everyone else's eyes. Trembling with rage, I tried to speak, but he turned and fled with bloodshot eyes before I could get a word out. He sobbed as he ran away. "Caleb!" Chloe cried out, her usual poise replaced by panic. She shoved me aside and sprinted after him. Taken by surprise, I lost my footing and fell backward, my head slamming hard against the wall. The world began to spin violently. Through my blurring vision, I saw a figure rushing toward me. "Edward!" a voice called out. It was Miriam. She had come back. When I regained consciousness, I was in a hospital bed with my head heavily bandaged. The faint, sterile scent of disinfectant filled the room. "Who brought me here?" I managed to rasp out through a dry throat. My memory was a jumbled mess, and I wasn't even sure if the worried face I had seen was real or a hallucination. The nurse tending to my Ford gave me a kind smile. "A Miss Waldorf brought you in." I was stunned for a moment. It really had been Miriam. "That's right," the nurse confirmed, sensing my disbelief. She kindly held out the intake form so I could see the name for myself. I closed the file, a strange warmth spreading through my chest. It was definitely Miriam. "Where is she now?" I asked. Did she leave a message or say where she was going? I bombarded her with questions. The nurse chuckled softly and answered patiently. "Miss Waldorf stayed by your side all through the night. She only left in a hurry this morning because of a family emergency." She paused for a moment to recall her words. She did say something before she left. She said there was no point in her hanging around, so she might as well go on a trip to clear her head. However, she promised she would return for the wedding and even said she would have a special gift ready for you. Those words lifted the heavy weight from my chest instantly. I had to bite back a laugh. If Miriam knew that she was the one I had chosen to be my bride, her jaw would probably hit the floor. While I was recuperating in the hospital, the local social circles were buzzing with scandals involving Chloe and Caleb. Did you hear? Chloe actually rented out every digital billboard on Wall Street for Caleb's birthday just to declare her love for him. That's nothing compared to the auction yesterday. Caleb dropped several $1,000,000 on charity items just to see Chloe smile. He's burning through cash like it's nothing. And just this morning, someone spotted them bundled up and sneaking into the maternity ward at the hospital. My friend Sophie was incensed on my behalf. "Edward, what is Chloe playing at? She's telling everyone she's marrying you while simultaneously parading around with Caleb." I stared at the sunlight dancing on the wall and let out a small, bitter smile. Some memories are like that, beautiful on the surface, but incredibly cruel underneath. Upon returning home, I dragged an old wooden crate out from the back of my study. When I opened it, I found it filled with every memento I had kept from my time with Chloe, items she had discarded without a second thought. I had one once cherished like sacred relics. The stack of love letters felt weightless in my hands, yet they had weighed so heavily on my heart for so long. I took one final look at the contents before snapping the lid shut and locking it. It was time to return these things to their rightful owner. I drove over to the Vance estate, but Chloe wasn't home. The butler informed me that Miss Vance and Mr. Hayes had left for the countryside early that morning. I couldn't have cared less about her whereabouts. I simply told my security detail to leave the crate in the foyer and prepare to depart. Just as I reached the door, I heard two familiar voices approaching. "Chloe, you're so good to me. I don't even know how to thank you," Caleb was saying. Chloe replied in a doting tone, "Caleb, I don't do these things for a reward. Your happiness is all I need." Caleb still sounded hesitant. "But what about Edward? He's loved you for so long. He's bound to have chosen you." His voice trailed off into a nervous tremor. Chloe quickly tried to soothe him. "Don't cry, please. I won't let Edward take me away from you. Caleb, ever since you saved my life in that fire, no one else has ever mattered to me." I froze in my tracks. A fire? She wasn't the one who had been saved. It was me. I remembered the day the school auditorium went up in flames. I had made it out safely, but when I heard Chloe was still trapped inside, I fought past everyone trying to stop me and ran back into the building. I managed to pull her out, but I collapsed the moment we were safe. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was Caleb's face. Had he really spent all these years taking credit for my actions and pretending to be her hero? I stumbled back in shock, accidentally knocking a vase off its pedestal. The sound of it shattering against the floor was deafening, and it was immediately followed by the sound of approaching footsteps. "What are you doing here?" Chloe asked, her eyes wide with undisguised shock. Looking at her feigned concern, I could only think about how absurd and pathetic the whole situation was. In my past life, she had been willing to throw everything away to be with Caleb. Now I realized that her supposedly eternal love was built on nothing but a pathetic lie. I fought the urge to expose the truth right then and there, forcing myself to remain calm. It didn't really matter whether she knew the truth or not anymore. "I'm just here to return some of your things," I said, stepping aside to reveal the wooden crate. The color drained from Chloe's face. "What's this?" "My dowry," she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Standing beside her, Caleb clenched his fists, though he couldn't hide a triumphant smirk. "Chloe, where do you get this confidence?" "Inside this box are." She cut me off before I could finish. "Give it up, Edward. I love Caleb now. If you call off the engagement now, we can still be friends. But if you try to force my hand, I promise you'll regret it." My hands were trembling with rage. She was making me out to be some pathetic, obsessed stalker who couldn't take a hint. "I didn't choose you," I stated flatly. "Oh," two voices replied in unison, but Chloe had already turned her attention away from me. Caleb's legs suddenly gave out and he collapsed to the floor. Even though I was several feet away, he acted as if I had physically threatened him, his eyes darting around and refusing to meet mine. Chloe shot me a venomous look when she saw Caleb on the floor. "Take your damn box and your people and get out of here right now." She bent down to help Caleb up and guided him into the house, never once looking back at me. I stood there and watched as she pulled him into a tender embrace, whispering soothing words to him. I recognized that gentle tone and those comforting gestures all too well. I didn't doubt that she had once felt something for me, but true feelings can evaporate in an instant. For the next few days, I holed up in my house, refusing to see anyone. My isolation was interrupted when Mrs. Davis burst into the room, looking frantic. "Mr. Edward, I don't know what's going on, but Miss Vance is here with a group of security guards. She's acting like a madwoman." I didn't even look up. "Tell them to leave. I don't want to be bothered." Before the words had fully left my lips, the door was kicked open with a thunderous crash. Chloe stormed in, her eyes bloodshot and her face twisted with rage. "Edward, why did you have Caleb run over?" she screamed. I was completely taken aback. "What are you talking about? Just because I told you to get out the other day, you decided to take it out on an innocent man." Without another word, she grabbed my wrist and tried to pull me out of the room. "Come with me," she demanded. I shook her off. "Have you lost your mind, Chloe? I haven't even left the house in days. How could I have possibly done anything?" She refused to listen and gripped my arm even tighter, dragging me out of the house and shoving me into her car. When we arrived at the ICU, I looked through the glass to see Caleb lying in a hospital bed. He was pale as a ghost, his head and arms swathed in thick bandages. "Mr. Hayes has a ruptured spleen and severe internal bleeding," the doctor informed us. "He also has a fractured ankle and several deep lacerations. The surgery was successful and his vitals are currently stable. He's in recovery recovery now." With every word the doctor spoke, Chloe's expression grew darker and more menacing. As soon as the doctor left, she turned on me, her eyes like shards of ice. "Do you have anything to say for yourself? Look at what you've done to him." I met her gaze without flinching. "What makes you so sure it was me? Have the police been called? Has anyone checked the security footage? Do you have even a shred of evidence?" My questions seemed to catch her off guard for a moment. The accident had happened so suddenly that she had reacted purely out of panic. She had based her entire accusation on a few vague words from Caleb. Deep down, she probably knew that things weren't that simple. But the sight of Caleb covered in blood and injuries had completely overwhelmed her with grief and fury. Just before being wheeled into surgery, Caleb had gripped her hand and begged her to get justice for him. Remembering that moment, her anger flared up once more. "If it wasn't you, then who else could it have been?" "Edward," she spat. "I can't believe I never saw how malicious you truly are." Chloe closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, they were cold and merciless. "You brought this on yourself, Edward. Don't blame me for what happens next." With a wave of her hand, several large security guards stepped forward and grabbed my shoulders. I stared at her in disbelief, a cold dread rising within me. I had a terrifying realization of what she intended. "Chloe, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice echoing down the hallway with a telltale tremor of fear. "You know the influence my grandfather has in this city," I warned. "Are you really going to do this?" The guard's grip on my shoulders loosened slightly as they hesitated, but Chloe silenced their doubts with a sharp command. "I'll take full responsibility." Her words were the final push they needed. Everything went black. When I finally woke up, I was back in my own bed. "Edward," Mrs. Davis said softly. She had been watching over me, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She took my hand, her voice thick with anger and sorrow. "That Vance girl has gone far too far this time." I looked down at the dark bruises covering my arms, my voice sounding cold and detached. "Where is she?" Any lingering affection I had for Chloe had been replaced by a cold, hard resentment. I felt nothing for her anymore. I was never the type of person to let others walk all over me. The only reason I had ever tolerated Chloe's behavior was because I had loved her. I had constantly excused her cruelty as a momentary lapse in judgment. But now, even the smallest spark of affection had been extinguished. It was time for a reckoning. "Your grandfather has locked her in the holding room," Mrs. Davis said, squeezing my hand. "I've known you since you were a boy, Edward. I know how much you cared for her." She hesitated before continuing in a pleading tone. "But look at what she's done to you for another man. If she's willing to do this for Caleb today, she might take your life for someone else tomorrow. A person like that is incapable of loving anyone but herself," she added. I patted her hand gently. "Don't worry, Mrs. Davis. I don't feel anything for Chloe anymore." As if on cue, the door opened and Chloe walked in. She was covered in marks and bruises, her posture slumped and her face as pale as a sheet. "Edward, what did you just say?" she asked. I started to answer, but she cut me off, trying to act as if nothing was wrong. "What happened was just a misunderstanding," she said smoothly. "I've already been punished for it. Can we just move past this, Edward? Why do you have to keep bringing up the past?" She held out a thin switch toward me, as if offering me the chance to strike her until my anger was satisfied. I looked at the switch in her hand and burst into laughter. "Chloe, do you truly love Caleb that much?" "I do," she replied instantly. "And let me guess, Caleb was the one who told you I hired someone to hit him?" Chloe remained silent for a long moment before answering in a distant voice. "Edward, Caleb had nothing to do with this," she said. "Just answer me. Is it true?" "Yes," I replied. I threw off the covers and stood up, walking slowly toward her. I reached out and tilted her chin up so she had to look at me. "So, that's what you think of me." Perhaps it was the intensity of my gaze or the coldness in my eyes, but Chloe seemed genuinely unsettled for a moment. After a long silence, she whispered a soft yes. I instantly snatched the switch from her hand and struck her with it. Chloe was clearly stunned. She hadn't actually expected me to hit her. Her shock quickly gave way to a simmering anger. She couldn't understand why I was being so difficult after she had already apologized and been punished. Just then, her phone began to ring. "Miss Vance, Mr. Hayes is awake," her assistant informed her. A wave of relief washed over Chloe's face at the news. She seemed to forget her own pain instantly and left the room with a renewed sense of purpose. As she walked away, I placed a hand over my heart. I felt an incredible sense of liberation. Finally, I whispered to myself, "I'm finally over you." I had no idea what she said to Caleb or if his injuries were simply that severe, but the two of them seemed to have vanished in a thin air over the next few days. Our paths didn't cross again until I was forced to attend a social event that I couldn't possibly get out of. Caleb was still clearly recovering, his ankle heavily bandaged. He played up his fragility, looking as if he might collapse at any moment, a perfect picture of a victim. Chloe was by his side every second, attending to his every need. Whenever he wanted a drink, she was there with a glass of water. If he looked even slightly hungry, she was there with a piece of fruit. She seemed to anticipate anticipate his every whim. Miss Vance is certainly devoted to Mr. Hayes, someone remarked. They've been together since they were children. That kind of bond is special. Wait, you've got the wrong guy. That isn't Mr. Anderson. If it weren't for him, Mr. Anderson would have. Every eye in the room turned toward me at those words. I acted as if I hadn't heard a thing, simply raising my champagne glass in a silent toast to the room. Most of the guests were from the same social circle and were well aware of the history between Chloe and me. Given our former status as the perfect couple, our sudden falling out was the talk of the town. Chloe, I've known you a long time, but I never realized you were such a good actress, Leo said, stepping in to defend me. Maybe that fire back in school scrambled her brain, someone else added with a laugh. Imagine turning your back on the person who saved your life. Unbelievable. The sound of a glass shattering rang out. Chloe stared at me, her face pale with shock. She was the one in danger, and Edward was the hero who saved her, someone whispered. Chloe stood frozen, looking completely lost and confused. Caleb's face went white. He was gripping his hands so tightly his nails were drawing blood, but he didn't seem to notice the pain. I looked at them and let out a soft laugh. The past is in the past, I said. There's no point in dwelling on it. Come on, Edward, tell us the story, Leo urged. We've been dying to hear the real version of what happened. Let's hear about the legendary heroics of the Anderson heir, someone else added. Your grandfather must be proud. I slowly stood up to address the room. All right, if you insist, I began, but Caleb suddenly stumbled. He collapsed to the floor, his movements reopening his wounds. Blood began to seep through his fresh bandages. Chloe, it hurts, Caleb gasped, his face pale and his lips trembling. Seeing him in such pain, Chloe completely forgot about the conversation. She rushed to his side and helped him up, muttering a quick apology as she led him away. She spent the rest of the evening tending to Caleb and never returned. After the party, I stood outside in the cool night air, letting the breeze clear my head. Edward, a familiar voice called out. It was Caleb. I ignored him and started to walk away, but he limped ahead and blocked my path. What do you want? I asked, my voice laced with irritation. Edward, why can't you just let me have Chloe? He pleaded. Fine, she's all yours, I said with a slight shrug. Words like that were easy enough to say. I know you're lying, Edward, Caleb said, his eyes red. He seemed to be talking more to himself than to me. We're not the same. You were born with everything. People flock to you wherever you go. I have nothing. All I have is Chloe. I couldn't help but laugh until my eyes watered. In 2 lifetimes, that was the first time anyone had ever called me lucky. Lucky? Did he mean being orphaned at a young age and having to raise myself? Or did he mean having the woman I loved betray me and throw me to the wolves? I guess growing up is just a long process of being stripped of everything you value. Believe whatever you want, I said, looking at him coldly. He had the answer he came for, and I had nothing more to say. Caleb's expression darkened, his face obscured by the shadows of the night. If that's your choice, Edward, then you brought this on yourself. As the words left his mouth, a strange sound caught my attention. 2 blinding headlights cut through the darkness. I looked up just in time to see a car hurtling directly toward me. The sound of the impact was deafening as I was thrown 20 yards through the air. When Chloe finally arrived on the scene, she found both Caleb and me lying in pools of blood. Chloe, help Edward, Caleb whispered, his voice weak and rasping. Chloe hesitated for a moment before gathering Caleb into her arms. Don't be afraid, Caleb. I'm going to get you to a hospital. What about Edward? Caleb pressed, forcing her to choose. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood. Don't worry about him, Chloe said coldly. Evil people like him always seem to survive. Even without Caleb saying a word, she had already decided that I was the one to blame. Even through the haze of pain, I heard her words perfectly. A chilling sensation washed over me, colder than the night air. I had hoped that even if our love was gone, the years we spent together would at least leave behind some small measure of kindness. Instead, she was willing to leave me to die just to be with Caleb. Evil people survive. Her words echoed in my mind until everything finally faded into black. Edward, you're finally awake, Mrs. Davis said, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She quickly wiped away her tears when she saw me looking at her. I'm just so glad you're okay. Sophie, on the other hand, was absolutely livid. She was already planning to go and tell my grandfather everything. Mrs. Davis stopped her. No, Sophia, the general has had a relapse and is currently resting at a private clinic. He's in a clinic? I asked, trying to sit up. I need to go see him. I reached for the form in my arm, but Mrs. Davis gently pushed my hand away. She promised to take me as soon as I was strong enough. As I settled back into bed, I noticed a warm paper bag sitting on the nightstand. Who brought that? I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. It's those brown sugar pastries from Eastwood Bakery, Mrs. Davis replied. They were my favorite. Chloe used to buy them for me whenever I was feeling down. Sophie noticed where I was looking and promptly tossed the bag into the trash. Disgusting, she muttered, scrubbing her hands with sanitizer. The trash can deserves better than that. Her dramatic reaction made me chuckle. Even though I already knew the answer, I asked, was it from her? My voice was still raspy from disuse. If she really had come by, I knew she'd be after more than just a peace offering. Don't even mention her name. Sophie snapped. The nerve of that woman. She had the audacity to come here and demand we call off the engagement. Does she actually think the world revolves around her? The bride hasn't even been announced yet, and she's already acting like she's the star of the show. Mrs. Davis tried to calm her down, but Sophie was on a roll. Honestly, Edward, just marry Miriam. She might be a handful, but she's 1,000 times better than that fake Chloe. Or better yet, don't marry anyone. We can just hang out for the rest of our lives. Sophie's infectious energy always managed to brighten the mood in the room. She was like a ray of sunshine in a dark room. I was tempted to tell her that I hadn't chosen Chloe, but I kept the secret to myself. But something always seemed to interrupt me whenever I was about to speak. It was as if fate itself was keeping me silent. So I decided to just wait and let things play out. There was no rush. As soon as I was discharged, I went straight to the clinic to stay with my grandfather. While I was there, Sophie kept me updated on all the social drama. When she heard Chloe was setting off fireworks for Caleb, she immediately arranged a private display for me that put theirs to shame. When Chloe bought Caleb a new car, Sophie sent a delivery of gold bars to my house just to make a point. Whenever Chloe and Caleb were at a gala, Sophie would flood Facebook with photos of us, complete with sentimental captions and love songs, until our friendship was the top trending topic online. It was obvious Chloe was trying to get a rise out of me, but Sophie was right there by my side, countering every move and giving Chloe a taste of her own medicine. Her antics were ridiculous, but they were exactly what I needed. Slowly but surely, the ice around my heart began to melt. We held a grand celebration for my grandfather's 80th birthday 3 days after he returned home. The Vance, Waldorf, and Miller families were all in attendance. As per tradition, we gathered at the family stables. The sound of hooves thundering against the ground was the only sound in the otherwise peaceful afternoon. The peace was shattered the moment Chloe arrived, arm in arm with Caleb. The sunlight seemed to highlight their every tender gesture. Chloe's parents looked mortified. They glanced at me, but I acted as if I hadn't even noticed them, continuing my conversation with a lively girl by my side. Edward, my grandfather said, drawing everyone's attention. "I'm here, Grandpa," I replied. He patted my hand warmly. "Go on, enjoy yourselves. The horses are ready." "Where is that Waldorf girl?" he asked, looking around. Mr. Waldorf stepped forward. "She's on her way, sir. She said she has a very special gift for you this year." "Good, good," my grandfather said, his eyes crinkling with a smile. "Miriam has grown into quite a fine young woman. I'm glad I can trust Edward to—" "Grandpa, it's getting late. Everyone is waiting," I interrupted, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. We all mounted our horses. My grandfather had somehow managed to arrange it so that Chloe was on my left and Sophie was on my right. Caleb, after a stern word from Mrs. Vance, was forced to trail behind us. His eyes were red, making him look like a wounded animal. Chloe shot a look back at him before turning her icy gaze on me. The tension between them was so thick that even Sophie noticed it. "Why did you cut your grandfather off like that, Edward?" Sophie asked. I was just about to hear the best part. Chloe seemed to relax a little. She had heard enough to know that my grandfather was planning to entrust me to Miriam, but she refused to believe it. If I hadn't chosen her, then why had I been so cold to Caleb lately? They used to be such close friends. "Stop it, Edward," Chloe snapped suddenly. "I'm not going to marry you." Her words were meant as much for Caleb as they were for me. Her words had the intended effect. Caleb's tears vanished instantly, replaced by a triumphant, smug grin. "Chloe, I thought you were in love with Edward," Sophie whispered, trying to bring her back to reality. "And the engagement was settled by your grandfather." "That was then," Chloe interrupted, her voice rising. "Can we please stop talking about the past? I love Caleb now. How many times do I have to say it before you all believe me?" The stables went silent at her outburst, but before anyone could respond, a horse suddenly spooked and came charging toward us. "Edward!" Chloe and Sophie screamed in unison. They both reacted instinctively, one trying to wave down the horse and the other shielding me. At that moment, a panic cry rang out from behind us. "Chloe!" Hearing Caleb's voice, Chloe didn't hesitate for a second. She turned and ran toward him without even looking back to see if I was okay. The new horse was already wild, and now that it was free of its reins, it was charging directly at me. The sound of the thundering hooves felt like it was hammering against my ribs. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't obey. Dust and a rush of hot air filled the space as the animal loomed over me. At the last possible second, a flash of bright red crossed my field of vision. An arm grabbed me around the waist and hauled me upward. Before I knew it, I was seated firmly on the back of another horse. I felt the warmth of another person behind me. I looked back and was stunned to see Miriam. It was Miriam. I hadn't even realized she was back. She was dressed in riding gear and had a mischievous smirk on her face. "You've lost weight," she whispered in my ear. Her breath tickled my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. She leaned in closer as I tried to pull away. "Hold on tight," she said. "I'm going to show you a good time." She snapped the reins, and the horse took off like a shot. She expertly guided us over one obstacle after another. The wind whipped past my ears, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. I finally let myself relax, feeling the rhythm of the horse beneath me. "Are you having fun?" Miriam shouted over the wind. I turned to answer her, but my forehead accidentally brushed against her cheek. Before I could even apologize, I saw a faint blush spreading across her neck and ears. We circled the field 5 times before finally slowing to a halt. When we dismounted, Sophie was waiting for us with an annoyed expression on her face. "Are you serious? I'm over there trying to wrangle a wild horse while you two are out here having a romantic ride?" Miriam ignored her and pulled a small, carved ring from her pocket. "This is for you," she said, handing it to me. The ring was still warm from her hand. As I took it, memories of my past life flashed before my eyes. During her travels, Miriam was always sending me strange little trinkets. But what she sent most often were rings of all different kinds. Every ring was unique in its own way. "Don't read into it," she would always say. She used that same old excuse again. "I just saw it while I was shopping for your grandfather and thought I'd pick it up for you." It was the same line she'd been using for 2 lifetimes. I looked in her bright, clear eyes and saw a hint of a mischievous smile. "It's beautiful," I said. "Miriam, your face is turning red," Sophie teased. Miriam's smile vanished, and she turned a bright shade of crimson. "Ooh, I think I've discovered a secret," Sophie teased, drawing out the words. Miriam's expression changed instantly. She grabbed Sophie, covered her mouth, and dragged her away. After they were gone, I started to look for Sophie, but someone stepped out and blocked my path. It was Chloe. My good mood vanished instantly. "What do you want now?" I asked, unable to hide my irritation. "Edward, please help Caleb," she said. It turned out that her father had heard about the incident at the stables and was furious. Mrs. Vance had been even more ruthless, immediately cutting off all business ties with Caleb's family. Chloe had tried to plead with her, but she had been flatly refused. Left with no other options, she had come to me for help. Her voice was tense as she spoke. "If you can convince them to let Caleb stay, I'll marry you." I swear, I could only laugh at the absurdity of her offer. I even began to clap. "And what if I say no?" I asked, looking her straight in the eye. Chloe's expression darkened, her eyes narrowing. She signaled to one of her guards, who brought out a small metal cage. Inside the cage was a small black kitten, huddled in the corner with its green eyes wide with fear. "If you don't agree, I'll have it killed," she threatened. It was Patches, a stray kitten I had found and raised until he was a fat, happy cat. I had cared for that cat for 5 years. He was like family to me. And now, Chloe was using his life to blackmail me into helping the man who had tried to destroy me. After a long silence, I let out a soft, mirthless laugh. The sound seemed to startle her. Before she could say another word, I walked over to her and stood looking down into her eyes. She flinched under my cold, distant gaze. "I agree," I said. The fear in her eyes was instantly replaced by relief. She looked like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She reached out to take my hand, but I pulled away. The color drained from her face again. "Edward, what is this?" "I'm letting Caleb stay, so he can take care of you," I said. "Weren't you two the best of friends?" "Chloe, who's the one living in the past now. I wasn't in the mood for games. I'll talk to them, but I have 2 conditions. If you agree to them, I'll talk to your parents." "Anything," she agreed quickly. "Just name it. First, you must attend my wedding, no matter what happens." Chloe's brow furrowed in confusion. She hesitated for a moment before nodding. "And the second, I'll tell you after the wedding." At the mention of after the wedding, a spark of hope seemed to return to her eyes. The phrase after the wedding seemed to give her a concrete hope to cling to, and it quickly took root in her mind. Thanks to my intervention, Mr. and Mrs. Vance agreed to postpone their final decision for a few days. As soon as her parents were gone, Caleb collapsed into Chloe's arms. "Chloe, thank God for you," he sobbed. His hands were cold, and Chloe gently rubbed them to warm them up. I stood there, watching the scene with a sense of amusement. I was the one who had saved him, yet he was giving all the credit to Chloe. It was just like when she had blamed me for everything. They really were perfect for each other. "You're so good to me, Chloe. I don't know how I'll ever repay you," Caleb said, his eyes filled with tears. Chloe wiped away his tears and patted his back. "Don't be silly, Caleb. You saved my life. I'll never be able to repay that debt." Hearing her words made my heart tighten. I wondered if she would still be so devoted to him if she knew the truth. I quickly dismissed the thought as ridiculous. I had more important things to worry about, like my upcoming wedding. The day before the wedding, I was in the middle of my final tuxedo fitting when Mrs. Davis announced that Miriam had arrived. Miriam walked in and paused for a second, a look of surprise crossing her face before she regained her composure. "It looks all right," she said simply. I could tell she was trying to hide her reaction, so I didn't take it personally. "I think it'll go well with your dress," I said. She shrugged. "Well, some people just look good in anything, I suppose." I noticed a flicker of sadness in her eyes. I leaned in close and whispered, "Are you here to find out who I chose?" We were so close I could hear her breathing. I was about to move closer, but she stepped back. "I'm just here to give you a wedding gift," she said. "I told you I'd be here, remember?" She held out her hand to reveal a beautiful ring. Miriam tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Here, Edward, congratulations on the wedding." On the day of the wedding, the entire estate was transformed with flowers and ribbons. A crowd of reporters and curious onlookers had gathered at the gates. I had always lived my life in the public eye, and everyone was eager to see who the mystery bride would be. "It's definitely the Vance girl," someone said. "They've been together since they were kids." "No way, that was just a childhood crush. I'm putting my money on the Waldorf girl. She's smart and beautiful." The air was thick with speculation. My grandfather led me out, his eyes glistening with emotion. The crowd erupted in cheers. The three potential brides stood in a line in front of the car. One looked anxious, one looked indifferent, and the third was waving enthusiastically to the crowd. The officiant stepped forward and began to unroll the official marriage contract. "Grandpa, let me read this part," I said, stepping forward and taking the document. I glanced toward Miriam. Our eyes met for a brief second before we both looked away. As I scanned the crowd, I was surprised to see Caleb. His eyes were bloodshot and his fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He looked as if he was about to charge at me at any moment. I took a deep breath and began to read. "In the spirit of this alliance between our families, this contract signifies an eternal union. The groom, Edward Anderson, and the bride, Miriam Waldorf." A hush fell over the crowd, followed by a deafening roar of approval. Miriam stood frozen, looking like she had been struck by lightning. I couldn't help but smile at her shocked expression. "Miriam, how long are you going to keep your groom waiting?" The announcement sent shockwaves through the crowd. Everyone knew that Miriam and I had spent our lives as frenemies. Even Miriam couldn't believe it. "Edward, did you really say my name?" she asked. Her voice was trembling with shock. I walked over to her and took her hand, pressing it against my chest so she could feel my racing heart. "Do you believe me now, Miriam?" I asked. "How is this possible?" she whispered. She pulled her hand away as if she had been burned, her eyes wide with disbelief. She grabbed the contract and read it over and over, as if to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. Sophie laughed and put an arm around her. "Congratulations. I'm so happy for both of you." I had known Miriam for years, but she had never once said the words, "I love you." Our relationship had always been built on bickering and teasing. We were like a comedy duo, but true feelings are hard to hide, like a persistent cough. Just as I had never been able to hide my obsession with Chloe, Miriam hadn't been able to hide how much she cared about me. Sometimes the person in the middle of it all is the last to see the truth. Sophie was the only one who truly understood the complicated web of emotions between the three of us. "Are you an idiot?" Sophie teased, rolling her eyes at Miriam's stunned expression. I had never seen Miriam look so completely lost. She was always so composed and in control. It was strange to see her so rattled. "Unless you don't want to marry me?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She grabbed my hand and squeezed it tight. "Of course I do, Edward. I've dreamed of this." Chloe finally spoke up, her voice tight with anger. "Are you done with this joke, Edward?" She was barely containing her fury as she searched my face for any sign that this was all a prank. "This is unfair to Miriam." "Edward," she said, still convinced that I was only doing this to make her jealous. I stopped smiling and looked her directly in the eye. The old feelings I'd had for her were gone, replaced by a cold indifference. "Is this unfair to Miriam, Chloe?" I asked. "Because you're still in love with me," she stated confidently. I had been so obvious about my feelings for her for so long that she said it without a hint of doubt. I couldn't help but laugh. "Yes, I did love you once." I felt Miriam's hand tremble in mine, and I squeezed it tighter. But those feelings are gone now. My words were soft, but they hit her like a blow. Chloe looked like she was in pain, but she struggled to maintain her composure. Before she could speak again, a hand was placed on her arm. "Congratulations, Edward and Miriam," Caleb said, sounding every bit the supportive friend. He was trying to look happy for us, but the smug grin on his face told a different story. He was clearly thrilled that I was out of the picture. Now he and Chloe could be together without any interference. He didn't seem to care what her parents thought. He believed that once they were together, they would eventually have to accept him. He shot me a look of pure provocation. "Thank you," I said with a polite smile. It was a smile that I knew would haunt Chloe. Not long ago, she had been desperate for me to leave. My grandfather tapped his cane on the floor, signaling for our attention. "All right, Edward, Miriam," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's time to get going. We don't want to be late." I looked at him, my own eyes filling with tears. The man who had been so strict with me as a boy had become a kind and gentle grandfather. "I'll take good care of him, Grandpa," Miriam said, her voice clear and strong. I could tell she was nervous by the way her heart was racing. Her attempt to remain calm made me laugh despite my tears. "That's right, Grandpa. And if she ever treats me badly, I'm coming right back to you so you can set her straight." Miriam just laughed at my empty threat. "That day will never come," she promised, her eyes shining with sincerity. The car pulled away from the estate and eventually disappeared from from view. Chloe stood where she was, her fingers clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. "One day you'll come crawling back to me, Edward," she hissed, her voice filled with a simmering rage. When she got home, Chloe was overwhelmed by a sense of emptiness. She had been so sure of her love for Caleb until now. In her past life, she had been willing to give up everything for him, even her own identity. This time around, she had gotten exactly what she wanted without any of the sacrifice. So why did she feel so miserable? She sat alone in her room for hours, lost in thought. Finally, Caleb's excited voice broke the silence. "Chloe, now that Edward is married, it's time for us to start planning our own wedding, don't you think?" A heavy silence followed his words. They both sensed that something between them was fading. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed and crossed his arms. "What's wrong? Are you still thinking about Edward?" he asked, trying to sound playful. He was fishing for a denial, but she just looked away, her gaze distant. Caleb couldn't handle her silence. He pulled up his sleeve to show her the scar on his arm. "Have you forgotten? I'm the one who saved you from that fire. You promised you'd always take care of me," he whispered, his voice cracking. Chloe felt a wave of guilt. She reached out and pulled him into an embrace. "I'll marry you, Caleb. I promise." Caleb beamed at her words, completely unaware that her smile had already faded. She had agreed to the marriage, but she made no effort to actually plan it. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new life as a married man. My obsession with Chloe in my past life had been legendary. She simply couldn't believe that my feelings for her could have vanished so completely. To her, my marriage to Miriam was just another attempt to make her jealous. She was convinced that I'd eventually come crawling back to her, just like I always did. But 2 weeks passed, and the only news she received was that Miriam and I were moving to Germany. Chloe finally snapped. Early the next morning, she showed up at my doorstep, her face set in a cold, hard mask. "I gave you a chance, Edward," she said. "If you leave now, don't expect me to take you back later." I couldn't help but laugh. I was a married man now. How could she possibly think I still wanted anything to do with her? What would it take for her to understand that I had moved on? I was about to reply when Miriam appeared behind me and wrapped an arm around my waist. She reached out and gave Chloe a gentle nudge. "Stand back," she said. "You're getting a little too close for comfort." Her tone was light, but there was no mistaking the jealousy in her voice. Chloe's gaze immediately dropped to Miriam's hand. Her expression darkened further. "This is between Edward and me, Miriam. It's none of your business." "Is it none of my business?" Miriam retorted. "Edward is my husband. We're a team." Miriam's smile was sweet, but her words were sharp. Chloe's confidence seemed to evaporate. She ignored Miriam and looked me straight in the eyes. "Edward, come with me. I don't care that you're married. We can go back to how things were." It was rare for someone as proud as Chloe to be so desperate, but I wasn't about to let her manipulate me again. "Go back to how things were? You mean go back to when you were constantly choosing Caleb over me? Or when you stood by and watched me suffer while doing nothing to help?" With every word I spoke, Chloe grew paler. She looked genuinely shocked. It was as if she was only now realizing the extent of the pain she had caused me. Miriam looked even more upset than Chloe. She had no idea how much I had been through while she was away. She squeezed my waist tighter, and I could tell she was barely containing her anger. She looked ready to take on Chloe right then and there. I gently placed a hand over hers to calm her down. "So, Chloe, is that the life you want to go back to?" She struggled to find the words, a sorry seemingly stuck in her throat. "Edward, Before she could finish, a loud slap echoed through the air. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. "Are you happy now?" I asked, my voice cold. "I loved you once, but that doesn't give you the right to treat me like garbage. I thought Caleb was your true love. What are you doing here then? Is your true love really that easy to walk away from?" Chloe stood there, trembling as if she had been struck. After a long moment, she managed to speak, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to worry about Caleb and me. We're getting married in 3 days." She had only come to tell me that. Without another word, she turned and walked away. The next 3 days went by in a blur. While Chloe was busy with her wedding, Miriam and I were enjoying our new life together. We spent our days relaxing, eating, sleeping, and just enjoying each other's company. The night before the wedding, Miriam asked me if I was really going to go. I let out a long sigh. Since our wedding, Miriam had been incredibly protective of me. She would get jealous if I even so much as glanced at another woman, and Chloe was in a whole other league. I turned to face her in the dark room, the only sound being our breathing. "Of course I'm going," I said eventually. "Why wouldn't I?" "Right," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "After all, she's the woman you've loved your entire life." She turned her back to me. I leaned in and rested my chin on her shoulder. "I'm going," I repeated. She didn't say anything, but when I tried to pull away, she reached out and pulled me back. "Edward, please don't go," she whispered, her voice cracking. My heart melted. I took her hand in mine and asked, "Miriam, if I hadn't asked, would you ever have told me you loved me?" In my past life, after I married Chloe, Miriam moved to Germany and we lost touch. But every year, I would receive a gift from her from some far-off place. The year she died, I received one final package. Inside was a box filled filled with hundreds of love letters she had written to me over the years, finally telling the story she had never been able to say out loud. Miriam was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke, her voice tinged with a hint of self-mockery. What would have been the point? My feelings for you were my own business. I chuckled. So your way of showing love is to be a total nightmare to me. Miriam finally let her guard down and poured her heart out. You have to forgive me, Edward. If I hadn't acted that way, you never would have noticed me. You only had eyes for Chloe back then. I never could figure out what you saw in her. She sounded like a hurt child. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone, just living on my memories of you. I never in my wildest dreams thought you'd choose me. When I heard the news, I felt like I'd won the lottery. I couldn't help but smile. Miriam always had her own unique way of showing she cared. All our bickering had just been her way of trying to keep me from falling into a depression. She always knew exactly how to make me laugh. I just never realized in my past life. In my past life, I was so caught up in my grief over Chloe that I didn't see the person who was right in front of me until it was too late. Fortunately, fate has given me a second chance. I don't love Chloe anymore, Miriam. I'm serious. I'm only going to her wedding to see the drama. Who doesn't love a good scandal? And as for marrying you, I'll admit I was a bit surprised at first, but then I realized I was truly in love with you. I love everything about you, even that stubborn piece of hair that never stays down. I love your jealousy and the way you always look at me when you think I'm not watching. But most of all, I love the person I am when I'm with you. I spoke from the heart, and I could feel Miriam trembling in my arms. She never thought she'd hear those words from me. Her whole world had revolved around me for so long. She wanted to share in all my joys and sorrows. But back then, I only had eyes for Chloe. Love is never simple. She loved me, and I loved Chloe. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. Since we got married, Miriam has been living in a dream. My confession left her feeling like she was walking on air. She pinched herself just to make sure she wasn't dreaming. It hurt, but it was the best feeling in the world. After we talked everything out, Miriam was in high spirits. We set off for the wedding together. The wedding was a rushed, haphazard affair, clearly put together at Chloe's insistence. Her parents looked absolutely miserable. Caleb was supposedly the son of an old family friend, but everyone knew he was actually his father's illegitimate child. Marrying into the Vance family was a massive step up for him. Even his normally cold stepmother had been unusually generous with the dowry. Even his father, who had always ignored him, was beaming with pride. Caleb is a lucky charm for this family, he bragged. When Chloe arrived, Caleb's stepmother gave him a quick wink before putting on a fake smile for Chloe. You're early, she said. We didn't expect you for another hour. Don't be silly, his father interrupted with a knowing smile. A day apart feels like a year for young lovers. Chloe couldn't wait to see her Caleb. That's right, Chloe said, her eyes scanning the crowd. She wasn't even listening, she was only looking for me. She refused to even consider the possibility that I wouldn't show up. After the ceremony, Caleb climbed into the car amidst a flurry of balloons and confetti. Chloe stared out the window as the car sped away, ignoring everything Caleb tried to say to her. As soon as she got out of the car, she looked for me, completely ignoring her new husband. Look, Edward, I kept my word, she said. The wedding is over. You're too late. She seemed to think I had come to stop the wedding, and her heart was racing with anticipation. She was desperate for me to take her back, for me to give her another chance. Just one more chance, she whispered to herself. I looked at her and gave her a polite, distant smile. Congratulations on your marriage. My words were like a bucket of cold water. What are you talking about, Chloe? I was invited. I'm not here to cause trouble. Miriam appeared out of nowhere and took my arm. You've seen too many movies, Chloe. Nobody crashes weddings in real life. She gave Chloe a smug smile. Congratulations. I hope you and Mr. Hayes are very happy together. Caleb finally caught up and grabbed Chloe's arm, pulling her close to him as if to stake his claim. Chloe is my wife now, Edward. It's time for you to let go. You're a married man now, he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. Why are you still chasing after my wife? Because of some childhood promise? Is it your excuse for being unfaithful to your own wife? He looked like he was about to cry. Everyone was staring at me now, their expressions a mix of confusion and judgment. Caleb was clearly enjoying his moment of moral superiority. He was waiting for me to lose my temper and storm out. I just looked at him and raised an eyebrow. Is that so, Caleb? Before you start making accusations, why don't you tell everyone how you really got that scar on your arm? My words seemed to strike a chord. Chloe's expression changed instantly. If it hadn't been for the fire, Caleb never would have been able to pretend to be a hero, and none of this would have happened. After 2 lifetimes, she was finally beginning to realize that the person she truly wanted had been right there all along. But she could never admit that to Miriam. She was determined to win no matter what. Tell them, Caleb, she urged, nudging his arm. She expected him to confirm her story, but he looked panicked. Chloe's parents were also starting to look concerned. Caleb's behavior was far from impressive. Mrs. Vance, who had never liked Caleb, was reaching the end of her patience. Caleb knew he had to say something. He gritted his teeth and tried to steady his voice. This scar, I got it saving Chloe from a fire. The story seemed to resonate resonate with the guests, and they looked at Caleb with newfound respect. "So that's the truth," someone whispered. "Chloe will be in his debt forever. He might look weak, but he's a hero at heart, saving his true love from a fire. That's a real man." Chloe's expression softened. "Thank you, Caleb. Thank you for being in my life and for everything you've done for me." She spoke the words, but she didn't feel anything behind them. Just as Caleb thought he was safe, a loud laugh echoed through the room. "You really are persistent, Mr. Hayes," Sophie said, stepping forward. "Your lying hasn't improved a bit." Caleb turned to see Sophie standing there with a smirk on her face. She took her time walking toward him, then let out a sharp whistle. Suddenly, the big screen behind them came to life. It showed a young man carrying a girl out of a burning building. The video ended with a close-up of the young man's face. "It was me. So, Mr. Hayes," Sophie said, her smile as cold as ice. She twirled a USB drive between her fingers. "How do you like my wedding gift?" She gave me a wink. Chloe was white as a sheet as she turned to Caleb. "What is this, Caleb?" Caleb was speechless. His silence was all the proof she needed. Chloe had promised her parents that she would take full responsibility for her marriage to Caleb, no matter what happened. Even though the situation was a complete disaster, she was forced to go through with the ceremony. As soon as the last guest was gone, she marched over to me. She finally knew the truth. She was in a daze as she walked toward me, not even noticing when Caleb tried to stop her. "Chloe, let me explain," Caleb pleaded, trying to pull her back. "I only lied because I love you so much. Please forgive me." But Chloe looked at him with cold, hard eyes. Any affection she had for him was gone. As I turned to leave, Chloe finally broke. "Edward," she screamed, "it was you. You're the one who saved me. Caleb lied to me all these years. Now I see the truth. It's always been you, Edward." Her outburst drew the attention of everyone still in the room. Caleb collapsed to the floor, his face twisted with rage and despair. His dream wedding had turned into a nightmare. Everything he had worked for was ruined. Caleb ignored the stares and scrambled to his feet, grabbing Chloe's arm. "Chloe, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. We can still make this work." He started to cry, hoping to win her over as he always had. But Chloe felt nothing for him now. "You're a liar, Caleb," she said, her voice cold. "If it weren't for you, Edward and I would still be together." She realized that Caleb had been behind all her misery in both lifetimes. Caleb's lies had cost her everything. Her anger was white-hot now. A crowd was gathering, and the situation was quickly spiraling out of control. Caleb's family was humiliated, and Mr. Vance looked like he was about to explode. "Chloe, Edward is a married man now," her father shouted. "What are you trying to do? I told you that you'd have to live with your choices." Chloe ignored him and ran out to my car, standing in front of it so I couldn't leave. "Edward, please don't go," she sobbed. "I know you still love me. I love you too. Let's start over." I could only laugh at the irony of it all. Sophie was even more furious than I was. She rolled down her window and screamed at Chloe. "Have some dignity, Chloe. Who do you think you are? Get out of the way." Chloe refused to budge, despite Sophie's insults. She moved closer to my window, clearly determined to get an answer from me. She stood her ground in front of the car. "Edward, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." It was the first time she had ever apologized to me in either lifetime. I lowered my window and looked into her tearful eyes. I saw the guilt there, but it meant nothing to me now. I felt no pain, no anger, and no regret. I finally realized that I was completely over her. A sense of peace washed over me. When I finally spoke, my voice was soft. "Some mistakes can't be undone, Chloe. I did love you once, but those feelings are dead and gone. It's time for both of us to move on." Chloe looked devastated. She couldn't believe that my feelings for her could have changed so completely. I had waited 10 years for her in my last life. She couldn't understand how I could move on so easily this time. Before she could say another word, Miriam stepped in and pulled her away from the car. "You've got the wrong man, Chloe. Your husband is over there." Chloe looked toward Caleb, who was standing in the middle of a crowd, looking absolutely miserable, but she felt no pity for him. All she felt for him now was pure, unadulterated hatred. He was the reason she had lost me. Miriam saw the look on her face and let out a cold laugh. She had never liked Chloe, but now she just felt sorry for her. Her dislike for Chloe had evolved from jealousy into a deep-seated contempt for her selfish nature. For the sake of their shared childhood, Miriam decided to give her one last bit of dignity. "You heard what Edward said, Chloe. Let go. Don't ruin what's left of our good memories with this pathetic display." She got into the car, and we drove away, leaving Chloe to deal with her parents and her new husband. In our past life, Chloe and Caleb had been truly in love. She had even faked her own death just to be with him. Even after being reborn, she had still held onto those feelings for him for a long time. But now that they were finally together, all she could think about was the man she had spent her last life running away from. Me. She thought back to the fire and remembered how Caleb had always been so vague about what happened. Looking back now, the truth was obvious. The person who had carried her out of the flames was strong and brave, risking his own life to save hers. That kind of love doesn't just disappear. She knew she had to see me one last time. As she was about to leave, Caleb grabbed her from behind. "I know I messed up today, Chloe. Chloe. I'm so sorry, but it's our wedding day. I'm not asking you to love me. Just have a little pity on me. Caleb had had a difficult childhood and had learned early on that you have to take what you want in this world. Even though he knew she despised him, he refused to let her go. He was putting on a show, using his tears to make her feel sorry for him. He looked so weak and helpless with his tear-filled eyes and trembling lips. It was a role he knew she couldn't resist, and he was determined to play it to the end. He saw her hesitate and knew he still had a chance. He stopped crying and kissed her. I know you're still thinking about Edward, Chloe, but he's married now. Just stay with me tonight. Part of her was disgusted by his behavior, but another part of her couldn't help but remember the man she had loved in her past life. Fine, she said. One last night. She woke up the next morning with a sense of dread. She got dressed in silence. Any trace of the previous night's tenderness gone. I'm only going to say this once. Caleb, I love Edward. Stop lying to yourself. By the time Chloe got to my house, we were already gone. The house was empty. She found out that we had gone on a trip with some friends right after the wedding. She had been so sure that I would be heartbroken that she had married someone else. She had even bought a bouquet of sunflowers and rehearsed what she was going to say. But the truth was that I hadn't given her a second thought. I was too busy enjoying my vacation with my new wife. My life had nothing to do with her anymore. Was it really too late? She wondered, her mind racing. Her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar face. Mrs. Davis recognized her and walked over, setting down her watering can. Miss Vance, Mrs. Davis said coldly, shouldn't you be with your husband on your first day of marriage? Mrs. Davis had long since lost any patience she had for Chloe. She had seen how Chloe had treated me because of Caleb. Now that we had both moved on, Chloe's presence was unwelcome. Chloe tried to ignore her coldness. Mrs. Davis, where did Edward and Miriam go? I need to speak with them. You can tell me whatever it is, Mrs. Davis said. You know how much Edward means to me. I won't have you bothering him anymore. Chloe's pride was wounded. I know I've made mistakes, Mrs. Davis. I take full responsibility for what happened between Edward and me. But he wasn't perfect either. If he hadn't kept hurting Caleb, things never would have gotten this bad. We both made mistakes. Why can't we just forgive each other and move on? She was still trying to justify her actions, completely unaware of how angry Mrs. Davis was becoming. Mrs. Davis was white with rage. I raised that boy. Do you really think I don't know who he is? Edward wouldn't hurt a fly. You're the one who was blind, Chloe. You're the one who was cold-blooded and cruel. How dare you blame him for your own mistakes? Edward knew you'd come back. He left a letter for you. Take it and get out. Mrs. Davis threw the envelope at Chloe's feet and slammed the gate shut. Chloe swallowed her pride and picked up the letter. A small part of her felt a glimmer of hope. He hadn't forgotten her after all. The letter was proof. She opened it with trembling fingers, her heart full of anticipation. But the words inside were like a knife to her heart. Chloe, by the time you read this, I'll be long gone. Our story has been a long one, spanning 2 lifetimes. But it ends here. Do you remember the second thing you promised me? Well, I've decided what I want. I want us to leave each other alone. I want this cycle to end once and for all. We go our separate ways. Chloe read the letter over and over, unable to believe what she was seeing. The letter confirmed what she had suspected. He had been reborn too. Everything finally made sense now. No wonder he hadn't chosen her. No wonder he was so happy with Miriam. He knew the whole story. She had hurt him so deeply in their past life that he had done everything in his power to move on in this one. And she had no place in his new life. She was the only one still holding on to a dream that had ended long ago. The realization left her feeling weak and she stumbled back, barely able to stay on her feet. How could this be happening? Why was fate so cruel? In her past life, she had lived a lie and lost everything. Now that she finally knew the truth, she was forced to watch as everything she loved was taken away from her. She walked home in a daze, Mrs. Davis's words echoing in her mind. I raised that boy. Do you really think I don't know who he is? Could someone like Edward really have been capable of such a thing? Her trust in Caleb had been shattered by his first lie, and once trust is gone, it's almost impossible to get back. Chloe ordered her assistant to reinvestigate the accidents. As she waited, she saw a message from Miriam on her phone. It contained several videos and documents. The first line read, Chloe, you and Caleb are perfect for each other. You're both manipulative and disgusting. Chloe ignored the insult and opened the files. She had to know the truth. The further she read, the paler she became. Everything was laid out in front of her. Caleb had hired the driver who had hit him. He had staged the entire thing, including the accident that had nearly killed me. Even the horse at the stables had been his doing. Chloe felt like the world was crumbling around her. She had hurt me over and over again for a man who had done nothing but lie to her. She had even threatened my cat just to protect him. She felt like a complete fool. She finally understood why I had been so cold to her. It wasn't because I didn't care, but because I had been hurt too many times. Chloe sat there, stunned. She felt like a puppet whose strings had been cut. When Caleb saw her, he rushed toward her with a smile. I knew you wouldn't leave me, Chloe. He looked at her, his eyes shining. I don't care if you still have feelings for Edward. I just want to be with you. I don't need anything else. He was trying to sound selfless, but his red, swollen eyes told a different story. His lips were trembling and tears were streaming down his face. But Chloe felt nothing but a cold, hard anger. She shoved him away, her eyes flashing with rage. "You bastard. How could you lie to me like that? You don't deserve to be in this house." Caleb stared at her in disbelief. Everything had been fine yesterday. What had changed? He felt a surge of fear. He had no idea what was going on, so he just started to apologize. "Chloe, I am sorry." "For what, Caleb?" Chloe asked, her voice cold. "What are you sorry for?" A tear fell on her hand. "I'm sorry for thinking I could ever be as good as Edward," he whispered. "Is that all?" she asked, her voice low and menacing. She gripped his chin tighter. "Is there anything else you want to tell me?" "Chloe, you know Caleb stammered. Chloe's voice was as cold as ice. "The car accident. The accident that almost killed Edward. The horse at the stables. Should I keep going?" With every question, her voice grew louder. Finally, she shoved him away and he fell to the floor. "Chloe, I'm sorry. Please, I was wrong." He sobbed, his tears flowing freely. "I only did it because I love you," he pleaded. But his words only made her angrier. "Love me? You think lying to me is love? You're nothing but a liar, Caleb. If it weren't for you, Edward and I would still be together. I want a divorce. I never want to see you again." Caleb was terrified now. He didn't care about Chloe. He only cared about her family's money and influence. If they divorced now, his reputation would be ruined forever. He thought about his father and what he would do if the marriage failed. A shiver ran down his spine. "No, Chloe, you can't do this to me," he screamed, his face covered in tears and snot. "Please don't divorce me. I'll tell Edward everything. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't leave me." He had worked so hard to get her, and now it was all falling apart. But Chloe's mind was made up. All the love she had once felt for him had turned into hatred. She couldn't even stand to be in the same room as him. The more she learned about his lies, the more she thought about me. She remembered my voice, my touch, and all the things she had thrown away. She felt a sudden urge to find me and beg for my forgiveness. The letter in her pocket felt like it was burning against her skin. A dull ache spread through her chest. How could she live without me? She was willing to do whatever it took to win me back, no matter how long it took. Caleb saw that his pleas were falling on deaf ears. He wiped his face and looked at her. "If you leave me, Chloe, I'll kill myself." He walked toward the balcony railing, but Chloe only looked at him with disdain. It wasn't the first time Caleb had threatened to kill himself. He had always been emotionally unstable, and she had always been there to pick up the pieces. She had supported him through his darkest moments, and she had once truly cared for him. Their relationship hadn't been entirely based on lies. She had truly loved him once, but his betrayal was unforgivable. How could he have lied to her like that? How could he have lived a lie for so long? Desperate, Caleb climbed onto the railing. There was a sickening thud as he hit the ground below. A pool of blood began to spread around him. Chloe's parents arrived home to find the horrific scene. Caleb was rushed to the hospital, and Chloe's plans for a divorce were put on hold. Even though they didn't like Caleb, he was still officially part of their family. They couldn't afford another scandal. A quick divorce would only make things worse. Chloe's parents ordered her to stay with Caleb, both to care for him and as a punishment for her own stubbornness. Chloe had no choice but to obey, spending her days and nights at the hospital. But her heart was in Colorado with us. She followed Sophie's social media posts and saw how much fun we were having. She should have been there with us. But now, her life was in ruins. Caleb was in a coma for 2 days. When he finally woke up, Chloe was there. She looked at him with an expressionless face. "Chloe, were you here the whole time?" he asked, his voice weak. "Your eyes are red." He was lost in a self-constructed fantasy of domestic bliss, totally oblivious to the storm gathering in her eyes. Caleb hadn't been entirely unconscious during those 2 days in a coma. He had overheard the muffled, angry shouting matches between Mr. and Mrs. Vance. Even though he couldn't catch every word, he felt confident that they would side with him when things got tough. After all, he had truly put his life on the line for this gamble. "I'll be back on my feet soon," Caleb said with a weak, forced smile. "Then we can finally go home together." Chloe remained completely silent. He took her silence as a sign of agreement, believing she was finally ready to move on with him. After all, Edward was married now and seemed perfectly happy with his new life. He figured there was no point in Chloe dwelling on me anymore, since she could only ever watch from the sidelines. Caleb struggled to sit up and reached out to wrap his arms around Chloe's waist. "Stay with me, Chloe," he whispered. "I'll give you everything." He was stunned when she suddenly and violently shoved him away. "I've already had my assistant draft the divorce papers," Chloe stated coldly. "Don't worry, we won't make a public spectacle of it. My family will provide you with a generous settlement, so we could just end this quietly." Caleb grew paler with every word she spoke. By the time she finished, the color had completely drained from his lips. "Chloe," he whispered, his head dropping as his voice began to shake. "We were so happy in our past life," he pleaded. "Why did you have to change when we got a second chance?" Chloe froze for a second before realizing that he, too, remembered everything everything from before. She had no idea how he had regained his memories and didn't care to find out. There was no point in hiding the truth anymore. The fact that we were happy before makes your betrayal this time even more unforgivable, she countered. I know the truth now. If you hadn't lied to me, I never would have walked away from Edward. We would have spent our lives together and been happy if you hadn't interfered. His jump from the balcony had been a desperate final gamble, but it had unexpectedly triggered the return of his past life's memories. To him, that previous life was a dream come true. Back then, the woman I loved and lost had fallen right into his lap. Chloe had spent 10 years adoring him. They had even renewed their vows, and their life together had been perfect. In this life, with me out of the picture, he was supposed to be her rightful husband. He couldn't wrap his head around being discarded so easily. Armed with those memories, Caleb was certain that Chloe still had feelings for him. He reached for her again, crying out, "Chloe, why are you lying to yourself? You don't really love Edward. You're just in love with the idea of the hero who saved you from that fire. It could have been me or anyone else. But we had a good life together. Be honest with yourself. Do you really feel nothing for me at all?" Chloe pushed him away without a second thought. "I did once, but that's over now," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "Caleb, I really did love you. I hurt Edward and gave up everything for you. And how did you repay that devotion? With nothing but endless lies. I know now that even our first meeting was a setup, just so you could sink your claws into the Vance family. Is there anything you won't do to get what you want?" As she listed his betrayals, my image became clearer in her mind. She realized that my love for her had always been genuine and unconditional. Looking back, she realized Mrs. Davis had been right about everything. She was the one who had been blind, putting all her trust in a wolf in sheep's clothing and slowly destroying her own life. A sad, regretful smile touched Chloe's lips as she thought of me. "I did love you, Caleb, but I love Edward more." Caleb's pathetic act vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, harsh laugh. Tears of mock laughter streamed down his face. "If you don't love me, just say so. Don't try to justify your selfishness with these pathetic excuses. You're just as fake as I am." Caleb dropped the act entirely, his expression hardening. "Don't act so holy, Chloe. Yeah, I lied to you, but other than the fire, didn't you go along with everything else willingly? You were lonely and desperate for someone to hold on to, which is the only reason I was able to get close to you. You only think you love Edward now because he's the one thing you can't have. And you have a nerve to say you gave up everything for me." His words cut deep, and Chloe turned deathly pale. "Caleb, what are you talking about?" she stammered. Her chest was heaving, and she found herself unable to look him in the eye. He held her gaze, refusing to look away. She, however, began to shift uncomfortably. "What's the matter? Did I hit a nerve? You know perfectly well that I'm telling the truth." Chloe knew he was right, even if she didn't want to admit it. He was exposing all the dark, ugly truths she had tried so hard to ignore. In their past life, their elopement had been romantic at first, but the reality of losing her wealth and status had quickly set in. Poverty has a way of grinding a person down until there's nothing left. Their love hadn't been enough to survive the harsh realities of their new life. She had thought about going back to her family, but she knew her father would never forgive her for the scandal she had caused. Chloe had worked every odd job she could find just to survive. Life was hard, but Caleb's affection had made the struggle somewhat bearable. Then, 10 years later, she saw me again. I was on vacation, and I wasn't alone. I was with a beautiful, elegant woman. We looked like the perfect couple standing there in the sun. Chloe still couldn't describe how she felt in that moment. It was a chaotic mix of excitement, resentment, pain, and longing. The longer we were apart, the more she missed me. She had even cried when she found out I had never remarried. She realized that I had never truly moved on from her. She had always thought of us as childhood sweethearts whose love was deep but ultimately doomed. She had wanted me to be happy, but seeing me with another woman was more than she could bear. The accident happened so fast. Before I could even react, she had pushed me out of the way and taken the full force of the impact herself. She lay there, broken and bleeding, but her eyes were still filled with that familiar stubbornness. "I'm sorry I lied to you, Edward," she whispered, "but Caleb and I truly love each other. If you ever get another chance, please don't choose me." If she had known then what she knows now, she would have held me close and told me how much she loved me. She wouldn't have let her pride get in the way again. Chloe was ecstatic when she realized she had been reborn. Her only thought was to get me back, but the memory of me with that other woman haunted her. To cope with her jealousy and insecurity, she had thrown herself back into her relationship with Caleb. It was as if seeing me suffer was the only thing that could ease her own pain. My suffering was her only comfort, but she didn't realize that one wrong move would lead to a lifetime of regret. Caleb's lies had fueled her hatred for him, and her own pride had cost her the one man she truly loved. Torn between her conflicting emotions, she ignored Caleb and walked out of the room. A week after he was discharged, Chloe presented Caleb with the divorce papers. Caleb was still very weak, and the shock of her demand caused him to collapse. He hoped his fragile state would elicit some sympathy from her, but he forgot that once love is gone, even death wouldn't move her. After all his attempts at manipulation failed, Caleb finally agreed to sign the papers. The maid immediately went to inform Chloe. She appeared almost instantly, a lawyer in tow, as if she'd been waiting for him to cave. As soon as the door opened, Caleb used what little strength he had left to shove the person he blamed for his downfall to the floor. Chloe was caught off guard and fell to the floor, her body trembling with shock. For the first time in days, Caleb actually smiled. The whole messy affair ended with Chloe in an ambulance and Caleb in a police car. Chloe didn't regain consciousness for another 2 days. Her head was heavily bandaged, and she was in excruciating pain. The nurse was relieved to see her awake and immediately went to find the doctor. Once the nurse was gone, Chloe tried to move and realized her left leg was in a heavy cast. Her assistant tried to talk to her about work, but Chloe wasn't listening. She grabbed the assistant's sleeve and asked, her voice trembling, "Has Edward left yet?" She knew my visa for Germany was likely approved while she was unconscious. She had been haunted by the same dream over and over again while she was out. It was our wedding day. I was standing at the altar, looking handsome in my tuxedo and smiling broadly. Our friends and family were cheering. Chloe was walking down the aisle toward me, her face full of love and determination. But then everything changed. Every step she took toward me, I took a step back. The distance between us grew until I finally vanished into thin air. The dream felt like a bad omen. Even before her assistant spoke, she already knew the answer. "Miss Vance, about the quarterly reports." The assistant started. "Wait, the doctor said you shouldn't be out of bed." Chloe ignored her assistant and the doctor's orders. She was determined to see me before I left, even if she had to crawl. She stood at my door and watched as Miriam and I stood together. We looked so comfortable and happy, as if we had been together forever. A wave of jealousy and regret washed over her. That should have been her place. If she hadn't made so many mistakes, Miriam never would have had a chance with me. Her anger boiled over, and she lunged toward us, determined to tear us apart. She completely forgot about her broken leg in her rage. She didn't make it very far before her leg gave out, and she collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. The sound immediately caught our attention. When Miriam realized it was Chloe, she was livid. She clenched her fists, her knuckles cracking. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here, Chloe." Miriam had learned everything that had happened while she was away. I told her it was in the past, but she wasn't about to let it go. Miriam wasn't the forgiving type. She wanted justice. Her eyes were red with fury as she grabbed Chloe by the collar and hauled her to her feet. "How could you do that to him, Chloe? If anything had happened to Edward, you could never have made it right." Chloe didn't even try to defend herself. She knew she deserved Miriam's anger. It was time for her to pay for her mistakes. "Miriam, please, give Edward back to me," she rasped. Miriam was about to strike her again, but I told her to go inside. I had to promise her I'd be fine before she finally relented and went inside. "I knew you still cared about me, Edward," Chloe said, her voice full of hope. Chloe was a mess, her face covered in bruises and swelling. "I divorced Caleb, Edward," she said. "I'm free now. You should leave Miriam so we can be together again. I know I've made so many mistakes. Please, just give me one more chance. I promise I'll change. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Just trust me one more time." She tried to reach for me as she spoke, but I stepped back out of her reach. She looked up at me and saw the coldness in my eyes. It was a look she had never seen from me before. Even after everything she had done to me in our past life, I had never looked at her with such indifference. She was a complete stranger to me now. "I'm so disappointed in you, Chloe," I said, my voice cold and hard. "No matter how much of a liar Caleb is, he's still your husband. I'd have more respect for you if you'd actually stood by him. You hurt me for him once, and now you're hurting him for me. Do you think love is just a game?" "No, Edward, of course not," she cried, shaking her head. "I've only ever loved you. Caleb lied to me and manipulated me." "Stop it, Chloe. Don't say you love me. Just admit it, Chloe. You're selfish and only care about yourself. You've never loved anyone but yourself." Chloe stared at me in shock. Just as she had when Caleb exposed her, she had no defense for her actions. She couldn't understand how both the men in her life had changed so much in such a short time. We were like strangers to her now. She just kept shaking her head, trying to convince herself more than me. "No, Edward, you have to believe me. It's always been you," she pleaded. But her words sounded hollow, like a drowning person clutching at straws. Looking at the woman standing before me, I couldn't even remember why I had ever loved her so much. How can someone take something so beautiful and turn it into something so ugly? "Edward, please don't leave me," she sobbed, her voice raw. "I've already lost Caleb. I can't lose you too." I ignored her pleas and picked up my phone to call Mrs. Vance. Once I had finished the conversation, I took Miriam's hand and walked away without looking back. Our visas for Germany had finally been approved. Our flight was at 9 the next morning. As the sun rose on our new life, Miriam and I were finally ready to begin our future together. If you find yourself in a toxic relationship, don't be so hard on yourself. Life doesn't offer do-overs, but every moment is a chance to start fresh. Don't spend your life in regret like Chloe or living a lie like Caleb. Be like me. Pick yourself up, find someone who truly appreciates you, and head toward your own new beginning. May your future be filled with love and happiness. You deserve to be someone's first choice, not just a backup plan. Never settle for anything less than a love that is true and unwavering.